What you're listening to is the RedShift 6 by Supercritical, and this is a really interesting concept. It calls itself a 6-voice variable character synth, and that's because it can change the way it sounds through digital control of its analog filters and oscillators. And here we're listening to me playing through its 5 characters: liquid, crisp, fat, sour and mean, which give us things like gooey, spacey resonance to SEM, 303 and ladders, and dirty, more MS-20 or Polyvox style filters as well. The character also changes the DCO tuning offsets and the drift and envelope shapes, and here are the envelope shapes for all the 5 characters at low and high resonance, and you can see the difference in the shape of the curves as well as the volumes as it changes the filter response. It can be quite subtle on these pads, but you'll hear later on the differences can be quite extreme. The RedShift 6 makes use of Supercritical's Demon Core oscillator module that's capable of producing up to 16 oscillators per voice, so we can have an immense 96 oscillators playing simultaneously. This is a 4-note chord we're listening to, but each of the oscillators is stacked and detuned, so we're actually getting 10 oscillators per voice here. That's 40 oscillators per chord, and that's why it sounds so rich without any effects whatsoever. This is a nice, sort of quite hefty desktop unit with a side light, which I wasn't expecting, which I found quite funky. It's 6 voices, and they've really gone to town on the 6 sides for the 6 voices, haven't they? It looks a little bit like a control panel of something you might find when you're playing Halo or something, but it's got a really nice feel to it. I like the fact that it doesn't look like a vintage synth, because it's not a vintage synth. It does a lot more than a vintage synth. The way it works is quite ingenious, I suppose. You've got the different pages, and on each of the pages the contextual encoders change their functions. We've got modulation sources here. You hit a modulation source and you twist something and it will modulate it, and then you can look at it in the mod matrix. Spin up to the top of the modulation matrix and there we have it. So pretty much everything's accessible within one key push. Envelopes 1, 2, 3, 4, LFOs 1, 2, 3, 4. What have we got there? Different waves on the envelopes. Nice that we've got different shapes. Rates go into audio rates. I've got note on, note off, and different triggers for the envelopes. And we can change the reset phase as well. Cut-off resonance, envelope amount, and the filter mode are always accessible, as are the stack, detune, and balance. And also we've got the character and the drive knobs. It's a nice construction, a nice metal box. Got a really great finish on it. Everything feels spot on. Someone in one of the comments after I put stuff on Instagram said that it looks a bit flimsy, and in absolutely no way does this feel flimsy in any way. We've got 3 stereo pairs out in the back. As it's 6-voice multi-timbral, or will be 6-voice multi-timbral, we will have the ability to have 6 different outs for 6 different tones. We have a USB port, which is currently only used for firmware updates. The first of those updates, however, will give us USB over MIDI. And we've got a full-size headphone output. But overall, it comes across as a nice, cool little box. The screen is pretty good. The only thing I'd say is sometimes when you're looking at the envelopes, is that it's a little bit hard to read the slopes on it. It's not as clear as some might be, but overall, no complaints over it. Go to the VCF, we can see the VCF modes. Any changes you make pop up on the bottom of the screen for a second or so. But yeah, it's a nice quality bit of hardware, and if you like a hexagon or two, there's nothing like it. And just to run through those characters quickly again, this is the liquid. If we go into performance, it's got a lovely, lovely resonance in that. It's described as a spacey resonance, filter pings dripping with dew, and that's not far off. Go over to toast or crisp. It looks like a slice of toast. It's got a bit more top end on there, a bit more SEM style. I've got it with quite high resonance so you can hear what's happening. then to ladder. So we can definitely hear there's distinct differences between them. Then we move to mean, and you can hear this is really dirty. Just flick through the others. And over to the acidy one. It's called sour. Let's just drop the resonance down a bit. And back to the liquid one. So not a bad starting off point. So as I showed in that little intro there, it's not just the character of the filter it's changing things on the oscillator as well as the envelopes. So when I say this is a really interesting concept, I really think it is, because it's an analog synth, and most analog synths have their own character, but this is an analog synth, but it's got multiple characters. It's got a split personality. So we can definitely hear the filters are doing something different, but let's take a look at what the oscillators do now. I'll start off with a simple sawtooth and try and describe what's happening with these oscillators. These are really cool, really complex. So we've got a single oscillator there. We've got different engines that are underway. They have got a map of which different engines and what's happening with the firmware on this. It's not the finished firmware. This is version 1.00. So some things aren't working, like the effects aren't working yet. There is going to be delay, there's going to be reverb, and there's going to be chorus, for example. So there's a few bits and bobs aren't ready, but there's enough happening in this to make it interesting enough to show you what the whole concept is. So come back to the DCO. On this engine, we've got 3 oscillators per voice. Got oscillator 1, balance, to oscillator 2, the square at the minute. And we've also got noise. But we have up to 16 voices per oscillator. So at the minute, this is using 3 at the same time. If we add the stack to that and detune it, we've got 16 voices, 1 being noise and the other 15 being the sawtooth and the square. In this case, there were 7 sawtooths from oscillator 1 and 8 pulses from oscillator 2. So that's 15 oscillators plus noise giving us the 16 voices. That'll give you 15 out of the 16. I don't know if that's making any sense to anyone. But we can see, I don't know if the camera's picking that up, but you can see how many stacked there. So this is just a single. No detune, so a sawtooth and a square. And you can see, looking at the oscilloscope there, that there is some movement. And that's been programmed in basically to this engine so that it gives it a little bit of drift. But we can detune as well. Detune oscillator 2. And undetune that if you're using an interval. But you can still hear there's movement in there. So we do have a lovely, rich analog tone to kick off with. On this engine, as I said, it's the only engine that's in there at the minute in this firmware. We've only got sawtooth and square. Go to the square. And actually, this is really handy. If you press shift, you can go to all the way to the left easily to, well, this is 25%, is that 50, 75 or 100? So you can easily get to 0, and that works on anything. So in the engine that's in at the minute, we've got 2 oscillators. We can detune the oscillators, we can add intervals to the oscillators, and we've got noise as well, and we can stack them. So when you play one note, you're listening to up to 15 oscillators plus the noise, obviously. You detune them. So that's just using a single voice. Again, I'm not sure if the camera will pick this up, but we can see which voices we're using there. So we're playing 15 oscillators here by playing a single note. Now we're playing 30 oscillators, 45, 60, 75. That's a 90 oscillator tone. Let's just go into the amp envelope and give it a bit of release. No effects. Sounds lovely and rich, doesn't it? Really like that. In fact, let's put that onto a chord. So go to the chord mode on this, hold chord. What have we got there? And the eagle-eyed will have noticed that I had the resonance turned up while I was showing that oscillator. I'll take the chord mode off. Just come back again, just for thoroughness. Take the stack down. Amp envelope off. Nice and rich again. Snip that so we can see what's happening. So all in all, with different engines, perhaps one engine might have just a single oscillator on there, in which case you could have 16 per oscillator. And as we've got 6 voices, that's 96 oscillators on a single note if you want. If you stack it in unison. Hopefully that's given you a good understanding of what the oscillators do. Let's move over to the filter next. Let's start off with the classic lather filter. We all know what that's meant to sound like. Very mogy and smooth. Let's add some resonance. Yeah, that sounds right, doesn't it? And a lot of bass in there as well, some rumbles. I'm just demonstrating sort of how smooth it is really, that it does. It is an analog filter, but with that digital control, I know people think, well, does it sound like a proper analog synth? And it 100% does. Add a bit more resonance. Watch your ears. I'm going to go higher. That's doing everything you'd expect, isn't it? Take the resonance down a bit. But what you might not expect is this mode knob. We're gradually taking out the bass there, turn it into a bandpass. And then add some more high end, and we've got a high pass. some resonance. So this mode knob is a really nice little addition. Got loads of different tones you can get out of this. So that's just the ladder filter. If we put it back onto low pass, I'm not going to go through every one of them in finite detail, but just to show you the differences really. So this one, yeah, really reminds me of the Polyvox. You take it up a little bit too far and it's just nuts. I don't know what it's meant to be based on, maybe an MS-20. Listen to that compared to the ladder. Much more depth in there, isn't there? Whoops, no drop in volume whatsoever when you turn the resonance up. Two resonant peaks there. 3 there. So this is much more for your aggressive tones, isn't it? Let's add a bit of envelope to that. Go into the VCF envelope, into sustain down. So all sorts of lovely dripping, acidy things you can do with this one. Moving over to the smiley face, which I'm assuming is an 18 dB acid style thing. Whoa, hello. Envelope modulation is negative or positive. Just trying to give you a flavor, really. Next up, this is the liquid one, but softer. Let's increase that decay time. It's a bit more Roland-y, do you think? Let's try that square actually. That's nice. And next up is the final one. This is toast. I keep on calling it toast. It's called crisp. It's a bit more SCM-y, this one. It's got like, seems to have a little bit more top end above the resonance. If we go to the last one. Definitely, yeah. I'm just looking at the frequency analysis there. Let's take the envelope off. And to get that to 0, shift, get to 0. To get to full, shift into the right, shift to the left to negative, and again to 0. So this is the, go to performance, we can see. This is toast. And this is whatever liquid is. Yeah, you can see, and you can hear the changes there. It's got a little bit more top end. It's nice on pads, this one. Let's turn this up an octave or two. Add some release. Back to the liquid one. Can you hear that's a bit more fizzy, this one? change the mode. Go to the VCF page so we can see what's happening. Got my fingers all tied in knots here. And again, let's stack that. There's no notch, which is a bit of a shame. There's so much in there, you know, you could just demo that filter for hours and hours. But the next thing to look at is the drive. So let's go back to a single sawtooth. Let's just reduce that release. So we've got this drive, which completely changes the feel of everything as well. So the acidy one. Back to the ladder. So let's add some envelope amount to that filter. Let's make that envelope a little bit tighter, shall we? It's not messing about now, is it? Just turn that down so we can see what's happening. Resonance off. I mean, I'm going way over the top with it. A lot of bass rumble in there, so let's just change the filter mode slightly. There we go, take some bass out. It's almost like adding a little bit of a high past this when you're adding or taking it towards a band pass. So you can imagine a Roland synth. Something like a Juno, for example, just bringing in the high pass. Or then adding more high in there. I'm supposed to be demoing the drive and I've gone back into filter mode. And what I found with this actually is that if I'm playing something like a chord or something, you can really bring out the character of the different filters and the movement that you get in the oscillators. So let's stack the oscillator again, detune it. Take the envelope off. Let's add some release to the envelope there. Add some amp release. You can hear the movement in the oscillator. It's lovely, that, isn't it? So out of the drive, you're not hearing that so much. So you can hear that there's different amounts of detune happening on the different characters. Detune or drift, whatever it is, but yeah. Great, all this. It makes it feel like it's a true analog synth, but you know what I mean? Some people have the criticism of stuff sounding like VSTs in a box, and this just doesn't. This has got a lot of life to it. So much smoother, this liquid one, isn't it? Again, the SCM style. I'm calling it SCM style, it might not be SCM at all, but reminds me of that sort of thing. We'll then go to one of the others. All that movement in there. So hopefully I've given you a good overview of what it sounds like. Other little tricks it's got up its sleeve is this modulation matrix, which is almost insane. Let's go to an initial patch, so shift and performance. We go into the DCO mode. Let's turn those into pulse. So, whoops, what we're doing, wave 2 pulse, pulse width. Let's just have a single pulse on, shall we? The quick way to modulate things is to hold the modulation source and twist something. So LFO1, let's twist it. So modulation amount of PWM, or the pulse width of 1. That's simple. If we go into LFO1, goes up into audio rates. So on this engine, we don't have any FM, but we can get those FM style things. Go to the amp envelope, add a bit of. Using the LFOs. We've got trigger modes for the LFOs. We've got none on at the minute. If we go into note on, it will always trigger at the same point. Note off. And we've also got, we can also modulate it with the other LFOs, which gives some really nice LFO movement. So let's go to LFO 3. Change the phase. You're not really going to hear much on a PWM tone now. Or if we modulate the filter doing that, so let's go to LFO2 and let's modulate the cutoff. We can hear they're all in time with each other there. It's a single LFO. Doesn't have to be though. We could modulate each key or modulate the LFO using the keyboard. So if we modulate using the keyboard, I'm going to modulate the rate of LFO2. So in fact, let's make that a little bit bigger. So go to the mod matrix. We can see the modulations that we've set up here. Let's come down to LFO2. The key to LFO2, let's turn that up a bit. So faster there. Let's just take the other modulations off so we can hear what I'm doing. So if we go to LFO1, we'll press shift and amount to get it to 0. So now I've just got LFO2 modulating the cutoff and the keyboard modulating the rate of LFO2. So let's modulate the cutoff a little bit more, shall we? Much slower, much faster. Nice little tricks like this. It's like polyphonic LFO, so it's not just a single LFO. So where I was getting to with that, basically. And then you can modulate the modulation. If we go back into the modulation matrix, we can modulate via, so that LFO, let's do that with the auxiliary envelope. So LFO2, we'll go to the aux envelope and we'll turn that modulation up. So let's go to the aux envelope, let's add some attack. So it's building to the LFO. So in this mod matrix, I think it's 32 slots we've got. It looks like we're not moving there, and that's because they all look the same. So let's just to show you that there's loads of them, and they've all got the secondary modulation in there. So if I wanted to add something to that, so modulate the VCF envelope or the aux envelope with the VCF envelope, you can do all that. We're not going into finite detail about how you use a modulation matrix. There's a lot in here. So 32 slots, and you've got these sources. Pretty much everything's a destination on all the different pages. So all these are destinations. One thing I found that wasn't was the detune of the oscillators, actually. If we go back to initial patch, shift performance, go to DCO. So to modulate this detune with the LFO, it's the only one I've found that you can't do. You can do this. Do the balance, but you can't modulate the stack or the detune. But again, that's on this engine. When they bring in other engines, it may do different things. So, or they may update that to do that. It's just something I've found, so pointing it out. But yeah, modulation, it's really simple to set up. So keyboard, velocity, aftertouch, modulation wheel, the voice, the gate, maths, that's not in there yet, and MIDI is not in there yet. So you can't modulate over MIDI yet. But pretty much everything else is working as it stands. ARP and sequencer coming soon. So the ARP and sequencer, MIDI modulation, maths modulation, macro effects, and clock are still yet to come, as are the multi-timbral modes. It will eventually be multi-timbral, and you'll have any combination of between 6 voices all playing the one tone, or 6 tones playing 6 individual voices. So any combination of that but that's not in this firmware, that's for an update. And as we've got the 3 stereo output pairs, it means that you will be able to have 6 different outputs for 6 different voices, each playing a different tone, if you wanted it to play 6 different mono tones, for example. Some polysynths don't sound great doing monotones. This 100% does, as you've heard with all those nuts things I was doing on the filter earlier. Yeah, so there you have it, a preliminary investigation of the Supercritical RedShift 6. As I've said a few times in this, it's very interesting. It's got lots of different characters. It does sound like a nice analog hardware synth. It doesn't sound like a VST. It's got little bits of grit and grunge with the drive and with the filters in there. It just does lots of different things and can be a monosynth. Does monosynth sounds really well as well. Well, I hope that was of some use to somebody somewhere. If it was, please do subscribe, ring the bell, share, do all that other sort of stuff. This channel, as you know, is funded by my Patreon, by YouTube ads, by affiliate links. My patrons get access to patches, samples, tutorials and other little goodies, all for the price of a dodgy lukewarm coffee a month. And do take a look at my starskycard.com website, as well as patches, the samples, the stuff to download, free stuff and stuff you can buy. And like I always say, do pick up some of the cheaper bits and bobs, although people rarely do. But it's worth asking anyway. It does all help to support the channel. Anyway, thanks very much for staying to the very end, and I'll see you next time.